I really appreciate you joining me today, and this news comes from Bradford. A 16-year-old boy has been jailed after a police chase resulted in a crash that killed 3 people. He has been jailed for 6 years and he will only spend 3 years in custody and 3 on licence.
Whitehall Road, got the wrong side of roundabout, still safe to continue. Yes. It's gone wrong way right.
Under the initial phase 2, correct?
Jack Sampson, 16 years old, pled guilty to the motorway collision that resulted in the deaths, and he was arrested for dangerous driving following the collision on the M606 in Bradford on Monday the 13th of June. Simpson was driving a Ford Transit van on Bradford Road in the vicinity of Moorlands Road in Birkenshaw shortly before he was involved in a head-on collision with a taxi at 10:45 p.m. on June the 13th. The taxi driver, Sohail Ali, 28 years old, and the passenger, Simon McHugh, 49 years old, died at the scene. A passenger in a different vehicle, a Ford Transit van, named Kyden Leadbeater, who was 18, died in hospital later on. Detective Inspector Paul Conroy from the Major Collision Inquiry Team said this was a tragic accident on the roads and we welcome Stephen admitting death by dangerous driving. He faces the consequences of these actions. The recklessness of Simpson shows the cost of dangerous driving and he showed no regard for any other road users. Our thoughts remain with the family that are affected by this, and West Yorkshire Police referred themselves to the IOPC following the crash. So I thought this was a really interesting story because in reality it's 3 years anything for the families that have been lost. 3 families have now got to suffer for the rest of their lives with their loved ones gone. And this young man's got the rest of his life ahead of him as well after he comes out in a few years. So I'd really like to hear people's opinions on that story. In some other news, 2 men have been jailed after they conspired to groom and sexually abuse children in Kirklees. Jeremy Mason, 39 years old, from Manchester, and Owen Daly from Oxford were branded a danger to children at Leeds Crown Court on August the 19th. Kirklees child protection officers welcomed the sentencing of the men who pled guilty to the offending, which included an attempt to meet and sexually abuse a male victim who was under 13. Mason was sentenced to 6 years in prison after he pled guilty to 14 offences, and some of them were causing and inciting a boy under 13 to engage in sexual activity and also sexual communication with a child. Daly was sentenced to 6 years also and pled guilty to 12 offences causing a child under 13 to engage in sexual activity and communication with a child. Both of them were given sexual harm prevention orders that will last them a lifetime, and they will have to sign on the sex offenders register forever. Their offending came to police attention in late December after officers were contacted by a friend of a victim who was on a night out and supposed to meet Mason at an Airbnb in Huddersfield. Police from the Kirklees online investigation team began to investigate and they traced back online and phone communications, and it came back to the 2 men. Mason was identified, traced, located and arrested within 24 hours, and Daly was located within a month following telecommunication inquiries. As investigations progressed, officers uncovered the victim had been contacted by an unidentified man who passed his details on to Owen and Daly. They recovered months of contact between the victim and the 2 men in which they sent him sexual imagery and made preparations for Mason to meet and sexually assault him. DS Ben Noley of the Kirklees protection team said, "We welcome the sentencing given to Mason and Daly for the offences, and they further planned more offences as well. It's good fortune that Mason did not come into contact with the young boy he was trying to meet, and the victim continues to receive specialist safeguarding care." So that story is definitely a big reminder to parents of the dangers of online as well, where a child under 13 is being groomed by people that are in their 30s, and it shows that parents really do need to be aware of who their children are speaking to and the applications they are using. So really appreciate you joining me for these updates. I'll be back again very shortly with some London news. Please don't forget to follow online as well at Scarcity Studios and send your stories to news@scarcitystudios.com.